responsible gaming best practices from around the globe and their application to Brazil's market.
Hello, responsible gaming. So this is my second trip to Brazil in a month, and I've had the pleasure of meeting up with friends and colleagues who are from Brazil, going to barbecues at their home, and the number one issue that they want to talk to me about in terms of the growth of iGaming in Brazil is what they perceive to be the biggest problem. And I saw this statistic. It was published by the Central Bank of Brazil, and it said in August, 3 billion reals were gambled by recipients of Bolsa Familia. 3 billion reals just in the month of August. And while this is a topic of great concern, it also represents a great opportunity for the country. So where I see an issue, I see opportunity. When I look at responsible gaming and I consider it as an issue that is being dealt with in regulated markets around the world, the first thing to realize is that what it is at the end of the day is a relationship. It isn't a problem. It's a relationship between the player, the operator, and the regulator. And there exists solutions, obviously, in terms of AI and what we can do to collect data and know who is wagering on a platform. Most of the problems we can identify these days can be solved by technology, but it needs to be a solution that is localized and fits the culture. And I will say in a very positive way that the Brazilian culture is a very unique culture and one that requires unique solutions to address the issues that we encounter. So if I look, I'm just going to move along. If I consider what's happened so far, we know that there are already regulations being introduced to address the issue of having welfare recipients gamble. Nobody thinks this is a good situation, and it's one that can be easily solved. And so we know that that's being addressed. We know that the CPF is looking at firewall to basically prevent this type of activity, and I think that's an excellent idea. 72% of Brazilian bettors are between 18 and 34, and over half earn less than 2 minimum wages. So we have an issue we need to address, and we want to be careful not to over-regulate it, and we need to do it in an open way. This is, I think, lessons that we've learned from other markets, because we want the public to have trust in the process. And what I would say is, while people are excited about having a new industry, I would say the trust is damaged when they feel that people who are least able to participate are the ones who are putting the money up for the industry. This is not a situation that can continue. And so I think the regulators have properly put a focus on this, and there are powerful solutions. But the truth is, the operators and the customers have a role to play here too. It's not all about the regulators doing their job. If you think about it, they can put firewalls up. They can require you to do income checks and make sure that people who gamble can afford to gamble. They can make you do self-exclusion, and they can make you adopt checks against lists that say these are people who should not participate. But what we really should be having here is operators having a direct relationship with their customers to foster the right behavior. And when this happens, we see that it works in other markets. If I look at if I look at the UK, I think we can learn a lot. And that's not to say that what's happening in the UK is what should happen in Brazil. But the UK took very aggressive steps, many of which have backfired. They had a problem that affected about 2% of the betting public in the UK, and the way they addressed that was by very onerous requirements in terms of proving up your ability to gamble. They basically banned advertising outright on soccer matches or football. They basically took a very aggressive stand in terms of disclosures that had to be made and checks that had to be done against exclusion lists. And what happened is they basically used a nuclear bomb instead of a strategic missile. And I think we can learn something from that. And one of the advantages in Brazil is we have a mobile-first experience. We've reintroduced gaming and everything is mobile. And a lot of solutions exist that can be introduced. It's not just about saying you have a responsible gaming policy, but it is carrying that policy through in the user interface. It's a way of rewarding people for taking responsible gaming into account, for limiting themselves. Don't make it a penalty. Make it something that is encouraged, rewarded to be sensitive to these issues. And there are so many ways we can use technology, AI, and all of the developments that have occurred in online gaming to foster that. If we look at, I know you had one issue in Brazil with influencers, and the influencers were, in essence, showing themselves always winning. Therefore, you felt, if they're always winning, I'm always going to win. And that was very predatory behavior. But that's not to say there's not a role for influencers. So the reaction was to say, no more influencers. And then people look to find ways around that, when the message should have been, why don't you use the influencers to carry a message forward? Which is, there's a responsible way to do this. There is a way you can put limits. The platforms have ways for you to do that. So I think a lot of it is learning the lessons from other markets and not overreacting, and also playing into the culture. I know for a fact that Brazil is a culture driven by influencers in a good way. I think it's great to have people who can touch so many other people. The issue is, what is the message that they're carrying forward? The message shouldn't be, if you play, you're going to win 100%. That's not true. The message should be, this is a form of entertainment that can be done within certain bounds, and I think we should just reorient that message. If we look at the US, and let's use some examples there. In the US, we have something called ROGA, and it's a clearinghouse model. One of the things is that so much data exists already, not just who are welfare recipients, but who have credit issues. Databases that help you isolate behavior. We have AI tools that allow you to study how someone interacts and how they bet, and what is healthy behavior and what is unhealthy behavior. We know these patterns. And so what they do in New Jersey is they share that information in a universal database that all operators, instead of thinking it as a competitive process, yes, there are many brands competing for market share, but we should all share the mission to make sure that we are doing this in a responsible way. Now, having a shared clearinghouse model, which we do in America, in New Jersey, is a great example. We have helplines in America with the casino business and with the online business. But instead of just having a helpline, we should reward companies who share statistics around how many people engage with the helpline, what type of outcomes did we get. In other words, use that as a tool to bring about change, not just simply check a box and say, well, we have this helpline. Is that helpline advertised? Is that helpline promoted by the same athletes that are promoting betting on the sports? Are they also promoting the fact that if you're having an unhealthy experience with this form of entertainment, that there are people you can go to who can help you through it? So I think it's not just enough to check the box, but it's important to put some measurement behind those efforts. Real-time behavioral AI is outperforming static limits. So the ability to study real-time play and to pick up unhealthy habits exists today. So everything that we're concerned about, we can solve. It's not only regulators saying you must do it, it's operators saying we want to do this, we want to be rewarded for doing it, we want to reward customers that act in a responsible way. And treat responsible gaming as customer retention. What you want to do is retain the customers who are the right customers to be participating in your form of entertainment. You don't want to be throwing investment at customers who shouldn't be partaking in it. So once we can identify who are the healthy, those that are having a healthy relationship with the activity, are the people that we should invest in to continue that activity. It's kind of common sense, and AI tools allow us to get to that result. And finally, as I've said in other speeches I've given at this conference and others, what I think is so unique about Brazil being the most recent market to regulate is that in many ways it's the most sophisticated from a technology standpoint, because you've had to be mobile first. In so many areas I could point to in e-commerce where Brazil leads the way. And I think there's an opportunity here, notwithstanding some bumps in the road early on, for Brazil to not only lead the way, but to show the rest of the world how to innovate in the area of responsible gaming. So I think overall it's a topic that needs the attention it gets, and I think it's getting the attention in Brazil. I think it is getting the buy-in from the operators. The technology exists, but I think what we need to do is to continue to evolve it in a very Brazilian way, taking into consideration the culture here, the local attitudes and standards, to be sensitive to that. And I think you're going to end up in the end having unique solutions that come from Brazil in the area of responsible gaming. Thank you. I'll take, if there's any questions, I'll take questions, or if someone has a comment or perspective. Yeah. I don't know if we have do we have a microphone? Maybe you could, yeah, there we go. Mark is the hostess with the mostest.
Even better.
Yeah. Thank you. Hi, thank you for the speech. I would like to hear your opinion. You mentioned that, for example, in the UK, they ban advertising in soccer, and recently in Italy, they also banned strictly advertising. And you well mentioned the problems from influencers, but I think there's also a big problem from pirate bets that they should not operate in this year, and it's still a big problem also for the government. Looking for the patterns that happens in mature markets such as UK, Italy as well, what pattern do you see that could happen in Brazil in the next months?
Well, look, I think obviously the first problem to rear its head was the issue of welfare recipients spending so much of their money. That is a huge problem for obvious reasons. That safety net is there to be spent on essential items, And I think we could all agree that participating in gambling is not anywhere close to an essential item. So there are solutions in place to deal with that. When I look at, and this was brought up when I gave a similar speech last year, the issue of advertising. Look, 90 to 95% of the sporting culture in Brazil is around soccer. It's such an important part of the culture. The monies that are going into sponsorship are also doing a service, in my view, to bolstering the investment in sport, which is integral to this country. So I'm not sure, and you could make the same argument in the UK. Premier League soccer is what every citizen in the UK lives and dies for. There's probably a healthy medium between where we are now and where it will end up. When I watch soccer now, I confuse all the flipping ads with even what's happening on the soccer field. It's overwhelming. And I think that has to probably be regulated to an extent. I think that's probably healthy because you don't want to detract from the main entertainment, which is the sport. And I think it's important what the messaging is. So it's one thing to say we're going to have this money go in to support different organizations that we also enjoy, but I think they have to get on board with making sure that there's a healthy adoption of gambling. So they have a role to play. It's not just to take the money, spend it on the sport. They have a civic role to play in making sure this is done in a healthy way for society. So I'm not a big fan of overregulation. I am a fan of localizing the solution for the market. And I have a feeling, based on how you have solved other issues in this country, and I'm not saying there are issues that go beyond just what we're talking about today in every country, but I think Brazil has a unique way of looking within itself to create progress and innovation. And I'm confident that the collection of operators, people, and regulators will find the right path forward. So I feel optimistic about that. Yeah.
Stephen, thank you very much for the insights. I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. Besides the example that you mentioned about NG, do you have other examples of markets that is doing this approach of sharing data to have better consumer and users understanding?
I would say in this example, I would say the US is a little bit unique. And part of it has to do with the fact that other markets are very strict in terms of GDPR and certain requirements, whereas America is more open, and therefore there's more access to data. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand. The more open, the more access to data, the more we can deal with the clearinghouse approach, and so these are issues that have to be balanced. Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you everybody. Till next year.